What was the worst physical pain you've ever felt in your life? When I was around 10 years old, I stepped on a piece of glass. I thought I pulled it all out. However, after a few days of walking around, I realized I still had pain where the wound was. My dad took me to the doctor and both him and my sister had to restrain me while the doctor tried to fish it out with tweezers. I screamed in pain during his whole long attempt. After a few unsuccessful attempts, my dad offered to try. He got it out in like 2 tries. The glass wasn't very big, but it still hurt quite badly. TLDR. Being held down while someone pulled glass out of my wound. For the record, if this even happens again, take a 2-hour bath in water with added Epsom salts. Don't touch it at all for the time in the water. Then try to remove it. It softens the skin and it'll partially if not entirely work its way out. Not as epic as some other comments. I have endometriosis that causes me extreme abdominal pain. Like, I vomited and passed out from the pain before. I still remember the day I found out my period pains weren't normal was while I was in high school. My mom came to wake me up and I had these sharp, searing pains that were so severe I literally could not move. It was almost time for me to leave and my mom came to check on me only to find me still in my bed. Eyes rolled back, in a cold sweat and more or less convulsing. I was taken to the ER and after a bunch of tests over the years, it was determined to be endometriosis. I will however never forget that morning. After that, I think back to all the times prior to my diagnosis where I had crippling pains and was told every woman gets this. Just deal with it, and I feel a little angry at how much I was dismissed. When I was 17 my mom passed away. I was living with a boyfriend at the time and we were in the process of moving. We were starting to pack. I ended up getting appendicitis a week after she passed and then a day after I was discharged I got pneumonia. My boyfriend at the time wasn't all that great so he left me to unpack so he could go out to the bar. He came back home at 3 in the morning with a girl, forgetting that I was at the new place and not the old one. I was on antibiotics for the pneumonia but had only taken Tylenol for the surgery pain. My mom had overdosed on opioids and I was sensitive to that at the time. Every time I cried, in grief or jealousy, or coughed it felt like my stomach was going to f***ing burst. This was a very long time ago. But it definitely was the worst pain in all areas that I have felt. All at once. Nerve pain. I pinched a nerve in my back. You may have experienced a lighter version with a tooth while at the dentist. That is about the closest I felt before, but that is much more temporary. It sits in the back of your brain just eating away at your sanity. Painkillers don't kill it but can get you so high that you care less. You may have a position that doesn't trigger the pain. If you're lucky you can be comfortable in that position. If not you'll end up cramping up certain muscles trying to avoid the pain. Recently happened to my girlfriend. A pinched nerve in her spine got progressively worse. We didn't know what it was at first. Until very early one morning I awoke to her in a great deal of pain and making a lot of noise. Her arms were on fire and she could barely even stand. Took her to the hospital. And one of the nurses or somebody giving an evaluation asked her to rate her pain on the pain scale. She gave it an 11. And my eyes widened. I said, "This woman has given birth to 2 boys." She said it was worse pain than that. I believed her. 2. She was suffering a whole lot. We got some treatments for her, including injecting a shitload steroids straight into her spine. But she still struggles with it to this day. And we are considering surgery. She is deathly afraid of it. Testicular torsion had me on the floor crying. I had to have one of mine removed. It was the size of a lemon. Tried walking for a few days and in the end I couldn't. Went to hospital. Doctor checked it and said fluid. Middle of that night got up in excruciating pain. Went to hospital again. Immediate surgery. FCK that doctor. Happened to my stepdad as well. Said he woke up and his nut was the size of a softball. He figured that for whatever reason getting in the shower with warm water would help. He says the pain he got from the water hitting his nutsack was one of the most painful sensations he's felt in his entire life. Dragging my hand across a shitty wooden table fast enough to lodge a huge piece of wood under my fingernail that went all the way to the end of the nail bed. Had to take public transit to an urgent care to get it removed. 2 hours of hell right there till the lidocaine hit. And X200B. Thanks for the silver stranger. My most upvoted comment ever about something I wish had never happened. The nerve pain from shingles. The open sores inched, burned, and ached, but it was nothing compared to the stabbing pain from the nerve bundle. Edit. Since this blew up, I figured I'd take the time to leave some advice. If you suspect you have shingles, go to the doctor ASAP, because the sooner they prescribe antiviral treatment, the smaller the risk of post-herpetic neuralgia, phantom nerve spasms and pain that last up to years after your shingles have gone away, caused by nerve damage from the shingles virus. If you don't have insurance in the US, go to an urgent care clinic, around $150 plus $20 for prescription antivirals for treatment and prescription anticonvulsants for pain. Don't risk permanent nerve damage and severe pain to save less than $200, and don't risk at-home homeopathic treatment because it most likely won't do anything. Meningitis. Think the worst cluster headache that lasts for weeks, and every step jolts it so hard you puke so you can't walk. Any sort of light makes you puke, and the painkillers barely take the edge off. Your bones ache. Your joints throb. You can't sleep, eat, but you can't watch any screens or read. Basically you get to lay there trying not to move. I didn't even close my eyes to sleep a couple nights because I was convinced I wouldn't wake up if I did. Hospitalized for 2 weeks. Spinal tap on my birthday. And took months to fully recover. 0/10. Would not recommend. Edit. Oh fancy platinum. Thank ya. Also this is in context of appendicitis, broken bones, ovarian torsion, close second, comma, benign, tumors, never-ending dental surgery and a few other odds and ends. Meningitis ain't no joke. Take care of ya body and don't keep going to class or work if ya sick. I got keyhole surgery to have my appendix removed when I was about 12. All was going well and everything apart from pain in my stomach, which was why my appendix was removed. Turns out I had an abscess below my belly button somewhere, and it started pushing on my intestines. It burst my scar open and pushed part of my intestines out of my stomach. When I got to hospital I was in agony. I've never felt anything like it. And one of the junior doctors didn't know what it was, so pulled on it with tweezers. Fucking ouch, that was my intestine. Senior doctor comes running in when she hears the screaming and looks at my stomach. Immediately starts shouting at the junior doctor and I got rushed to theater. Bitch, that was sore. But yes, my appendix was also inflamed, which is why I was discharged. They thought the pain was just from surgery and me being young or some shit. Edit. Yes, the intestines don't hurt themselves, but the surrounding tissue does. When I was in high school, I put my contacts in the wrong solution and essentially soaked my eyes in hydrogen peroxide. I thought that the pain would go away eventually and that I could muscle through it. So I went to go pick up a friend. By the time we got to her home, my eyes had swelled shut. So we had to go to urgent care for the doctors to numb my eyes enough for me to stick my fingers beneath my eyelids and take out the contacts. I couldn't open my eyes for 3 days. Oh god. I know exactly which solution that was too. It doesn't help that it looks exactly like contact solution. I made the same mistake and stupidly reached for my contact solution to flush my eyes out, not realizing it was the same hydrogen peroxide cleaning solution. I thought I was going to die. Was moving a couch for a then girlfriend that was weak as hell. She couldn't hold her end hole going up some metal stairs at her apartment. The couch fell on me and I tumbled down the stairs with it bouncing on top of me. L4/L5 and L5/S1 injury with tearing along the discs. 10/10 pain and I lost the ability to walk for several days. Also, it turns out that she was a lesbian. When I was 16, my appendix burst at summer camp and I went without medical treatment for 3 days. The camp nurse told me I had altitude sickness And the adult volunteers didn't recognize that it was an emergency when I had stomach pains so bad I couldn't walk and told me to drink lemon soda. It wasn't just regular appendicitis. The appendix actually burst and my body apparently walled off the infection, stopping me from getting septicemia or a blood infection or whatever. I actually felt somewhat better the day after. Definitely would not recommend. Fortunately, I eventually got to an excellent surgeon and made a full recovery. I broke my wrist at a 45-degree angle. Setting it was the worst pain I've ever experienced. They put my fingers in a little Chinese finger trap thing with weights on my bicep. I had to pull as hard as I could to set the bone back in place. Felt like I was going to pass out, throw up and shit myself all at once. Same exact thing happened to me when I was 11. I vividly remember the weights and the Chinese finger trap thing as you described, lol. Gallbladder. I was shaking uncontrollably and just curled over in pain on the bed. Went to the ER and they just gave me a GI cocktail and a Percocet and sent me home. Didn't make a difference. But then I fell asleep. Woke up an hour or two later. And the pain was gone. Edit after sleeping the night. Looks like a lot of people got your gallbladder removed. Did that have any negative impact whatsoever? I saw a gastroenterologist who DX'd me, unlike the 13-year-old ER doctor. But she said that we could wait and see if the pain is recurring and then consider removing the gallbladder. But it only happened twice. And hasn't happened since. I am currently recovering from gallbladder surgery I had 2 days ago. I didn't know such pain was possible. It radiated up into my back, between my shoulder blades and even my chest. I thought I was legit dying or having a heart attack. After a few days I finally went to the ER and they put in a rush ultrasound for me same day. That was at 3:30. The doc called me around 8 PM like, yeah, go back to the ER. Had surgery Saturday morning. I had an infection in my dry socket from wisdom teeth removal. I wanted to die and all the world's law tab couldn't put a dent in that pain. One time I suffered a ruptured brain aneurysm where I was hospitalized for days and almost died. My brain basically tried to self-destruct and still that f-king dry socket was worse. Getting a shot in the bottom of both feet for plantar fasciitis. The shot itself didn't hurt. The DR slides the needle up and down looking for the spot. I honest to God saw stars when he hit it. If I could have reached him while laying down I'd have beat him to death. The next 2 days felt like walking on Legos. A horse stepped on my toe once when it got scared. Over the following months, I watched my toenail fall off and grow back like nothing happened. The human body is f-king metal. I got bit by a horse on my upper thigh. Seriously the worst pain I have ever experienced. I was rolling around on the f-king ground in pain for almost 15 minutes. Left a massive bruise and a welt that lasted almost a full year. Gave birth to twins via C-section. Back in recovery the nurses came in every half hour or so to massage the FCK out of my uterus. Through the belly. To help contract the uterus back down. They said, it will be fine. They said, well that sumbitch epidural had plumb worn off in like 45 freakishly fast minutes, and I felt every sharp, searing, horrific bit of that pain. I literally had tears pouring from my eyes and could barely breathe. I would freak out when I would see them coming back in the room for more torture time. Dear Jesus. I had some nasty contractions before that. But they don't even come close to those uterine massages. That whole surgery, actually, was insanely painful. The tiniest bumps in the road on the way home had me screaming in agony. Took many weeks for the extreme pain to diminish. Thank God my next pregnancy was a singleton. I told the doc no way could I go through a C-section again. And no one was massaging my uterus. Well, after a failed 12-hour VBAC labor we ended up having to do another section when baby became distressed. However, because my uterus was not overly distended as there was only one baby in there this time, no uterine massages required. Hallelujah. I literally had zero surgery pain either this go around. The experiences were literally night and day. Accidental anal. Oh god, I've told this before. One time my ex and I were having sex on the edge of a bed. I was behind her. And she moved opposite of my thrust. And back, and in the same motion I went out of her and hit her ass very hard. What happened next was one of the scariest moments of my life. She yells out in excruciating pain. And then says she's blind. Like she can't see anything. I'm like, WTF, I'm freaking out. I'm about to call 911 and her vision starts to come back. The pain from that accidental anal caused her temporary blindness. Edit. This ordeal was probably 45-60 seconds of full blindness, but it felt like a couple minimum. I was not trying to explain to her conservative parents why she can't see anymore. Had a gallstone block the liver and pancreas ducts. So pancreatic juices backed up and started dissolving the pancreas. Fun. Liver and pancreas were swollen with backed up biles. Etc. But it was okay. Spouse told EMTs, after I called 911 at midnight, that I was a hypochondriac and a snowflake, and ran ahead to tell this to hospital staff who would have treated me quicker. When I projectiled the Prevacid across the room, staff ran some tests. I passed out and woke 2 days later in the hospital. Thank God there were good docs there. I owe them many thanks. Kidney stone. Without question. 49-year-old man here. This happened almost 20 years ago and the agony is still fresh. The pain was almost indescribable. A brutally dull ache belt level that sent me from this is uncomfortable to someone get me to the hospital now. In about 5 minutes. But worse was the removal of the stent that had been placed inside after I got to the hospital. Nurse held my dick. Doc took a gun-like contraption with a small alligator clip at the end of a long flexible tube-like apparatus and stuck it down the pee hole. I remember clearly his words at one point. I'm going past the prostate, so this may burn a little. Next thing I know, I feel like a rush of liquid is coming out of my DCK as he yanks the stent out. Nothing came out behind it. But it honestly felt like a tidal wave of blood, or who knows what else was going to pour out. Afterwards, I asked for a few moments alone in the room so I could somehow begin to process what had just happened. It was almost a week before I even dared to jerk off. And if you know my habits, you know that means I was seriously nervous about what might happen. A week. Since then, I've had a heart attack, runs in the family, and a heart cath and cardiac stent. That was nothing. Nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing compared to the kidney stone experience. I had infected tooth a few years ago. The pain from that in itself is bad enough. But the visit to the dentist to fix it was the worst I've ever had. I'd only just moved to the area. And this was my first visit to this dentist. We did the usual course of antibiotics followed by root canal work. In the chair I got a couple of injections to numb the gum. And they start drilling away. After a while I start feeling a dull ache that got stronger. I mentioned it. Or gargled something. And they injected me again. The pain was still coming through. So they decided to inject direct into the tooth. Jesus F-king Christ. I've felt nothing like it. They literally had to hold me down. In the end they stopped. And temporarily filled the hole. I had the last laugh. As when they finished up, my mouth was so full of anesthetic I didn't know I was biting down on the dentist's finger. Had just gotten an IUD put in and literally collapsed from the pain near my pelvic area a few days later. Turns out I had ovarian cysts that burst and the ER doctor couldn't really do anything except let it pass and give me drugs. IDK what it was. Something similar to morphine. But it felt great. I ended up throwing up from the pain, but I honestly thought I was going to die. Just had open heart in September. Sure. The incision and breastbone breakage was painful. But nobody prepared me for the removal of the drainage tubes in my stomach. And then when they stitched the holes shut, I almost cried, threw up, and was so thankful I asked the nurse to stay with me for moral support. She let me hold her hand. She was great, since my mom would have passed out if she had stayed. Definitely the hardest part of surgery and recovery for me. 15/10 would not recommend. The worst pain I ever had was drinking on disulfiram. Disulfiram antabuse is a drug used to prevent relapse in alcoholics. I'm not sure the exact mechanism of it, but I think it does something like floods your body with the chemical responsible for hangovers. So you get a hangover multiplied by a bazillion million. Ingesting even a small amount of alcohol will result in a violent reaction, including a histamine reaction, vomiting, headache, body pains, etc. It also builds in your system, so even after you stop taking it, you can still have a very severe reaction. I was on it for 8 months and ended up drinking after only being off of it for about 24 hours and was completely incapacitated. Violently wrenching and vomiting bile. Hives and swelling all over my upper body. Pounding. Merciless headache, and my whole body felt like someone had taken a meat tenderizer to it. 0/10 do not recommend. Well, so you know how some male babies after birth have to have circumcision done? Well, FCK me, I had it done when I was around 10. After the operation I had to have bandages on my dick. So basically my DCK was covered with bandages and blood, and if I wanted to take a piss I had to remove those bandages that were stuck to my penis, and after doing so put new ones. You can imagine the pain of doing it few times every day for 2 weeks. I couldn't walk, sleep, eat. Yay, just a great time. I stood on a weaver fish when I was 11. Google states that the pain is often described as excruciating. All I can say to that is yes. It honestly felt like if I looked down my foot would literally be on fire and meeting off the bone. My mum told me to stop making such a fuss. Made me hop up the beach to the car, and I didn't get seen for treatment for an hour. The pain was so bad I remember biting my shoe against the pain. Apparently the venom poison attacks the autonomic nervous system. 14 years later I became ill and was diagnosed with a form of dysautonomia, which I'm sure is probably down to that BLD weaver fish. Never go in the sea without hard-soled shoes on. It's not worth it. The area of my foot where the 4 spines punctured still aches when it's cold out. I've broken a toe at jaunty angle. Convinced myself it was just badly bruised and walked on it for a day and a half. I've had a sewing machine needle go through my nail and foam my finger. I've had shingles. And I've had one of those tests where they put dye into your bloodstream that feels like acid in your blood. Seriously. None if that comes close. One time I was wearing flip-flops. Dangerous sport, folks, and I won't lie. I had a few drinks. I was walking fast and went to turn down the stairs quickly. I think my flip-flop held my big toe to the side and the rest of my foot walked forward. I felt terrible pain. But was like, how bad could it be, and figured I like sprained something, so I attempted to take a few steps. I then looked down and saw my big toe bone had pierced through my skin and my toe was pushed to the left of it, on my right foot. Docs called it a compound dislocation. No one had seen this happen before, as the bone usually breaks. When I went to the hospital after the fleet of medical professionals taking pictures of it, they started to give me anesthetic shots, and this experience was the most painful of my life. I got 13 injections in my one big toe that was tapered off my foot, and yes, I still had full feeling. The team was trying to decide how they should set my toe, and I guess I clenched my foot and my toe popped back on perfectly. I remember looking down and saying, "Hey, who put my toe back on?" and they said, "You did. Saved us a lot of trouble." Watch out for the alcohol flip-flop combo, folks. I had a tiny little growth on the inside of an eyelid and it scratched the surface of my eye. It doesn't sound much, but the pain was constant and existential. It was the start of allergy seasons and I just thought it was a bad allergy at first. But the non-specialist doctor diagnosed it as a viral eye infection and just prescribed painkillers for a week. I spent a week in bed, high on codeine. I hate codeine. It got better. But then in a month, it came back. A trip to the eye hospital revealed the problem. And the doctor got a scalpel and removed the growth in 5 seconds. Without the need for anesthetic. I still had to spend another week in bed on codeine whilst my eye healed. It doesn't sound like much. But I contemplated suicide to end the pain. But only for the briefest of moments. Oddly. In the 2 weeks after each week in bed, I didn't need my glasses at all. But after that my vision returned to its normal abnormal state. I have PCOS and get cysts. I was unaware of this and wasn't on medicine at the time to regulate them. So one got to the size of a baseball. It tore, didn't burst. That would have made it too easy. And I began bleeding profusely to the point I was dizzy and throwing up from the pain. I was unable to drive, so my father had to drive and pick me up from university and drive me to my gyno. The gyno, I have since found a new one. Tried to play it off as spotting between periods. It's normal. You're fine, while I was still alternating between dizzy spells and throwing up. I told him I was throwing up from the pain and felt like I was dying. He finally ordered an ultrasound, but spent the whole time telling me it was a waste of time and resources. The nurse literally said, "What the FCK is that?" when the cyst showed up. The doctor quickly backpedaled. Even when I get cysts now, it's painful, but nowhere near that much. Had to have it surgically removed. When I was younger, I got a tattoo on my foot that I immediately regretted. I was too scared to tell my parents and too dumb to look for any other form of help. So with a friend we sat in my truck. I wanted to be hardcore, so I bit down on the seatbelt and proceeded to use the cigarette lighter in the car to try and burn off the tattoo. I held it on for 5 seconds and then took it off. To my delight, my skin was bubbled up. Don't worry, I came prepared. I used my scissors I brought to cut off the now dead skin. This is the moment I learned tattoos go deeper than the top layer of skin. I went into straight panic and attempted to burn it 2 more times at 7 and then 10-second holds. I walked away with now a highlighted tattoo thanks to a ring around it and charred looking skin. In my panic, I took tweezers and the scissors and just cut off the rest of the skin. Between the burning and cutting, the entire experience was the worst physical pain I have ever felt. The tattoo is gone. I now have a circular scar on my foot. Massive ear pains following an infection, as well as shifting between not being able to hear anything and everything sounding distorted. Was about a month before hearing returned to normal, and the pain lessened over time. But even with painkillers, getting to sleep that first night was absolutely hell. Didn't help that my cat decided he didn't like me that night and clawed my face while I was laying in bed. I had the flu a few years ago, and fluid build up in both ears at the same exact time. I'm assuming it was an ear infection, but never went to a doc. I thought the radiating pain and dizziness were the worst, but the sound distortion sensitivity had me getting my shifts at work covered because there was too much noise and I would have gone insane. It also took me about a month to hear normal. Hell's itch. It comes from sunburn. Mild or severe. I can best describe it as fire ants biting you underneath your skin. But you can't scratch or touch it because it irritates it more. Good God, I got this a few years back. I'd gone to Hawaii and gotten a pretty mild sunburn. It didn't even hurt. Then I started itching a bit. Then I started wanting to peel my skin off as I laid crying on the floor. I started taking alternating scalding hot and ice cold showers. That helped a bit. I then thought it might have been some sort of histamine response and I took a ton of Benadryl. That finally helped. I once had a 3-month stay in a hospital for a very bad case of pneumonia. They had a machine to give me morphine on a timer, so I could only push the button for it once every 8 minutes. I woke up one morning to the hospital staff saying they had to take out the pleural tubes and put new ones in. Keep in mind the morphine from the machine takes a while to work and usually didn't help my pain until after the button had been used twice. Throughout the day I would hit that button as soon as I could just to stop the constant pain I was in. Here I am just barely awake and I haven't used any pain meds at all to stop the normal pain, and they were going to cut the sutures. Pull tubes out of my chest that were draining fluid from around my lungs. Clean that up. And put new tubes in. Then suture them. They stuck me with a needle to numb the area, but it did jack shit to help, let me tell you. I had an impacted bowel when I was like 17. I thought I was just really constipated, but no. Eventually I woke up in agony. Went to the bathroom and tried to shit. The pain on my lower left side just got worse and worse. I was shaking and dripping with sweat. I used my cell phone to call my mom, who was just down the hall, because I thought my intestine was going to rip open from the pain. My mom is a nurse. Worked in the IQ for years and you could tell she was freaking out but holding it together as best she could. I begged her to call an ambulance. Right after she did, I vomited from the pain. The force of my stomach contracting from the puke forced a hard chunk shitty out my other end. So there I was, dripping sweaty, vomiting shitty and blowing it out my ass too. I kept shitting but the pain didn't stop. Eventually my mom cleaned up my vomit off the floor and I just curled over and got on my knees. I couldn't move so she wiped my ass for me. Thanks mom. When the paramedics got there I still couldn't move. They lifted me on the stretcher and going down the stairs and the whole drive to the hospital was excruciating. I got some x-rays and was told I was still full of shitty so they gave me laxatives. I shitty for days I swear to God. That was even worse than surprise anal. That hurt so bad I stopped breathing for a good 30 seconds. Nothing compared to the at least 2 hours of pain from this though.